Aye, thank you so much. Thanks, everybody. Thanks a lot for the really interesting comments in the chat. And I just saw there was a question there in the Q&A about the links, and I think all of that will be made available on the Gallery Teachers website. Yeah,
Exactly.
and a certificate will follow. Yeah.
Exactly. Exactly.
Um, Well, I was thinking that I know we had a couple of reflective questions that I might be asking you, but there was something really interesting that came up, I think, from Michael.
Right.
Uh,
We can ask Michael to voice his question.
yes,
So
that's a dreamy background picture, Michael. I don't know where you are, but I wish could be there.
I'm in southern Italy, but that's up
Ah.
in Genoa. Yeah, that's a beautiful spot too. But my question was just that you want to go and check the meaning with the questions, but wouldn't it sometimes be sensible to just start even more basic by making sure that they know if they're dealing with a verb or a noun or an adjective?
Thanks for that,
Yeah,
Michael. So I think, as you said, we can ask them about the form. So we could say, so the word is embarrassed. Okay, so is that a noun? Is that a verb? Is that an adjective? And if they know that it's an adjective, happy days. But do you know what? It made me think about here's another embarrassing story. I have quite a few, Michael, but here's one. I took up Japanese years ago, right? And I thought I can do this, no problem. And we had this lesson, and we're looking at clothes, and the teacher first told us, look, we're going to look at adjectives. So I thought, okay, so I know they're adjectives. And then we started talking about clothes. So in my head, I just assumed that all the adjectives were for colors. So I was taking notes. Oh, that word is red. That word is yellow, right? Thinking I'm I'm getting this, right? And at the end of the lesson, he gave us homework to do for the following lesson. And I realized like the homework was all about adjectives of shapes and sizes. So I put up my hand and I said, no, I think that's the wrong homework because that's not about colors. Everybody looked at me like, seriously? We've been at this for 40 minutes. How did you not get that we're talking about, it's soft, it's tight, it's loose, it's silky, So I think generally in my practice, I tend to go for meaning first because I think if they've got the meaning, then I'll work with the accuracy. I'll work with form. But I'm not saying I don't like the black and white. It must be like this all the time. My general rule of thumb is I'll check meaning first, and then I'll look at form and pronunciation. But again, like with everything, your students, and you may find that some students are really preoccupied with accuracy, and they need to know if a word is an adjective. And I think that's fine if you want to deal with that first. But I think just bear in mind that even though they've understood that it's an adjective or a noun or a verb, it doesn't actually mean that they're following you. They might think they understand, like me thinking that I understood all the colors in Japanese, but actually just not get it. I have other embarrassing stories, but that'll be for another day. I hope that helps, Michael. What do you think?
I don't know if I'm talking or that. Yeah, that was great. That's very helpful. That the focus has to be ultimately meaning, but maybe we can look at parts of speech and so on. But meaning is the focus.
I think so. I think
Okay.
so.
Thanks for
Thanks
your
for
answer.
that. Thank
Okay.
you, Michael.
Thank you.
So let me check the chat, and then if not, I'm gonna be asking you questions about CCQs.
I
Right?
have a question, Sophie, that relates to what you've just talked about. And so it's is clarifying meaning limited to the presentation stage in a lesson? When we discuss, let's say we teach a lexical item or teach lexical items or any target language, maybe grammar. And we have the meaning, form, pronunciation that we walk our students through. So do we need to limit clarifying meaning to the presentation stage?
That's a lovely question. Thanks for that. I don't think so. I don't think so, because I think we can check understanding throughout the lesson. But I'm just a couple of things there popped to mind. I was thinking, well, first of all, I think ICQs, so checking instructions, is something we do, and it's another way of checking that students have understood. So I said before they get on with the task, checking, are you working alone? Are you reading or are you writing, etc. I just, whenever you were asking the question there, I also thought, well, let's say you've done your presentation stage, you checked meaning, you focused on form and on pronunciation, then you've moved on to your controlled practice. And let's say during the feedback, you notice that a few students have got something wrong. So I don't know what you're guessing. Do you think, oh, it's too late? It's too late to ask a CCQ. It's feedback for controlled practice. No, no, no, no, no. Or do you think it's okay? I don't. For me, I think CCQs can be used in a remedial way. Right? So we say, well, okay, this one's on me, guys. I thought you were clear with this. It looks like quite a few of you are not. So let's go back to this and check. So I think it's a really useful way to provide some kind of remedial teaching, even throughout different stages of the lesson.
I agree, and I think it's even necessary in a sense, so that once we are done with the MFP, checking meaning, form, pronunciation, and then you go back to checking meaning a little bit later in a slightly different context, making sure that they really get the meaning of the word. So
yeah,
exactly.
I agree, and I think there's a really good point there from I'm sorry, pronunciation of names, definitely not my forte. From, I've lost it in the chat. I think from Ilknur, saying, well, maybe when we wrap up, we can ask we can use CCQs, and I think 100%, because it's a nice way as well to do really quick review before the students pack up and go. Why not? And again, I think it's just one way to keep your students engaged. Because if they think, oh, I'm just going to be asked questions about halfway through the lesson, and after that I can just I can just relax. Well, no. So I think it's a really good point. And yes, I think you can definitely use CCQs as you're wrapping up.
Yeah.
Also checking that they remember what they have to do for the next lesson. What's your homework? When's it due? Yeah. As a form of assessment, yeah, absolutely. It's an informal way of assessing that students have understood. Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. I don't know if there are any other questions, or if I can start asking some.
I have questions.
Okay.
So
Yes, by all means.
either way. So, right, because we are talking about, or you were talking about checking meaning using CCQs and also realia, like pencil, for instance. But are there other techniques that teachers can use to check the meaning of grammatical items, lexical items, or even functional language?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And again, I think it's whenever we're planning our lessons, CCQs are not like the be all and end all of everything. They're a tool, and we use a tool when we need it. I find that, let's say, if you're teaching Lexis and you're teaching weather vocabulary, so you're teaching from freezing to boiling, decline really lends itself to that particular target language. Or if you're teaching adverbs of frequency, from never to always, adverbs of frequency can really lend themselves to using clines. I think that's useful. I think when it comes to teaching grammar, especially narrative tenses, I think timelines. I know it's it's a hot potato, isn't it? It's a controversial topic. Again, I think somebody said earlier and said, oh, I like the image of the hook and the chains. For me, I find that timelines are a very visual way of explaining tenses, and it saves so much talking. It's just like, here it is. Can you see this? You know, which action is this? That's the cross. What action is that? What tense do we use here? Um, so yeah, there are different ways of checking meanings. I think CCQs, of course, timelines, clients. We can get students to finish sentences. So let's say we give them the first part and ask them to complete the second part, let's say using a second conditional, right? Complete the sentence that it's true for you. So it's personalized, but it's also a way to check that they've understood that we're talking about an unreal situation. So it's not just to do with form, it's also checking they've understood that, you know, we're talking about a hypothetical or a very unlikely situation using the second conditional. So I think, yeah, I think, you know, here's another one, opposites. Is another way we can use we can use to check meaning. So again, if we go back to our weather vocabulary, so let's say if freezing comes up, we could say, well, you know, what's the opposite? What's the opposite of freezing? Yeah, and if they don't, you could say, well, is it cold or is it boiling? So maybe we can offer them 2 or 3 different options. Synonyms work, opposites, antonyms also work as different techniques for checking meaning. Yeah, thanks for that, Hedy. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, very much so. And
Yeah.
I can see that Gabi has added to this, if I can read it. She says that she sometimes gets students involved in writing CCQs for
Yeah.
other students so that they can work
Yeah.
in pairs or
Yeah.
groups.
Do you- I think I think Gabby's a fan of the trick questions. I am too. I really am too. But there are some that I really like, right? It's I think after a while, if you teach the same students for quite some time, students get used to you asking them CCQs, right? And they kind of rely on you asking them. So then what I've started doing when I teach, let's say, functional language or grammar, I'll say to them, say, okay, so when you're not in class and you have to send that formal email, so you want to get it right, how do you know if you should use, I don't know, if you should use the past simple or the present perfect? What questions do you need to ask yourself? So again, so okay, in pairs, make a list. 3 questions you should ask yourself if you're not sure and you don't always have your teacher at hand, right? So you're like, oh, I need that answer now. I can't ask my teacher, right? My teacher always asks me those really annoying CCQs. But what questions do I need to ask myself? So I actually think that you're right, Gabby. We can train our students because I think it's one way to help them become that bit more autonomous. You know, um, and that just reminded me of something that I heard not long ago. And it was to do with elicitation. And it was this webinar with Scott Thornbury. And he made a really good point. And I think sometimes it's the smallest things in teaching that make such a big difference. He said, okay, you're teaching your elementary students and you say, okay, what's the past of go? And you say, okay. And the student says, oh, it's went. And I think most teachers will go, good, right? But he said, contrast this with, okay, what's the past of go? Student says, it's went. Ah, how do you know? And I thought, oh. So again, it's getting the students to kind of ask themselves, hold on a second, how do I know this? How does this work? And it's really about, having the cogs, the brain cogs working. So I agree, Gabby. I think getting students to ask CCQs to test each other or training students to kind of think, okay, when you're not sure about this, what questions should you ask yourself? I think is really useful. Yeah.
I sometimes just ask them that, really? Are you sure? And then they just, stop for a second and start thinking as well. It's just because through these moments, they may remember more, and we just cemented, this knowledge even more. So, and
Yeah.
Sophie, as I loved your examples of language that you used, like give up, that you through which you showed us how not to ask CCQs and how to ask good CCQs, and actually, Gabi had something to comment on regarding this, and she says that she has seen teachers checking understanding of individual words in an idiomatic expression as opposed to just checking the meaning of the phrase, it's like turning it into a guessing game. Like, what's the opposite of get or receive? Let's say, that give. And what's the opposite of down? Up. Good. So it's give up.
And I think, I think we're all guilty. We've all done it, because it's like, like whenever you're learning a language, you need to get things wrong before you get them right. I think as teachers, we have to get things wrong and then go, oh, that didn't work well. Why not? Okay, I'll try that instead. But I agree. I think that happens a lot when we teach idioms, when we teach phrases. But I've also seen that a lot when people teach grammar, and instead of checking the meaning of the structure, they just go straight for checking the meaning of lexis. So I think, and I know that's not the answer people like, but I think it's planning. I think it really comes with planning. And for me, the key, I'll say, whenever you're planning lessons, there are maybe ways you can save time. Yes. But one thing I would not encourage people to save any time on is analysis of meaning. Because unless the meaning of the target language is crystal clear to you, and you know exactly what you want your students to get to understand from this, I think you could easily mislead them, or you could check meaning in ways that will only add confusion. So let's say if you're teaching a phrasing, the phrase that was drown your sorrows, well, you need to, you again go into the dictionary, Google it. It doesn't matter if you're a native speaker or you're not a native speaker. But I think just take the time to actually go and check, say, okay, what do I want the students to understand from this? And again, I think, like in the previous workshop with literacy, I think it's maybe harder for native speakers, right? I think if you've learned those phrases, you've learned them, if you've learned the phrase to drown yourself, you've learned it as a chunk. So you're maybe less likely to check one word at a time. But I'd say if you've gone through your planning and you've identified all your target language and what you really want the students to understand from each phrase, then I think that will really, really help how you check meaning. And I think if you think, well, I don't know, do I need to concept check? I mean, it's a lot of questions. I think, again, when you have your analysis of meaning, I think for my plan, I always have that extra column for what problems can I anticipate? Right? Because I think, well, actually, if I honestly can't anticipate any problems, I'm going to show them a banana. I can't see what else they could understand. I'll go, okay, that's fine. But if I go, okay, drown your sorrows, I go, okay, so somebody might think that it's something to do with drowning and somebody swimming. Okay, so I need to check. Okay, so is drowning your sorrows connected to swimming? No. Okay, but I think if you're able to anticipate problems that students may have with the meaning, that really lends that itself to then scripting a couple of CCQs, because you're better off knowing that students are confused, so that you can help them.
I can see Luminita raising her hand, so you can unmute yourself. Luminita?
Yes, I'm here. Hello.
Hello.
Do you see me? I'm not sure.
No, but I can hear you.
Can you? Okay, thank you. Hello, everyone. Hello. I just have a question in terms of, is it possible that using the CCQ, those kind of questions, can it beneficially contribute to the development, or let's say improving our native language? I mean, the native language of the students. Thank you.
Oh, hold on, I have to write this down.
Really?
Sorry. Short attention span. Thanks for that, Luminita. And I think it's a brilliant question. I love it when questions come up that I honestly could not have anticipated. That's one of those, Luminita. So again, I just want to check that I've understood the question right.
Yes, please.
Okay, so you're wondering if CCQs can help students develop their own language awareness of their L1?
Yes, of course.
I think 100.
How well this language acquisition can, let's say, influence them?
I think that's a brilliant point. I do think it can help. I really think that through concept checking, especially if then you ask the students to maybe draw a parallel between, let's say, a phrase like drown your sorrows, and say, is that something that translates in your first language?
Well, not all the time.
You know?
Unfortunately, sometimes when for example, when I administer, let's say, an evaluation or an assessment test or things connected to translations, they always, wherever I want it or I don't, they will make associations with their native language. And ours is Romanian. Of course, maybe there are some associations, but not totally. So this is probably one of the problems that students encounter. They always make those similar, they make those connections with their native language. That's why I am wondering whether it is possible to somehow impact the native language by CCQs.
I I really think so. I really think so, because I think anything you learn in a second language is something that also helps you revisit your first language. Because, and I don't know if you'll all agree, feel free to let me know if you don't, but I think whenever we learn a language, especially, as adults, we're not babies, we're not blank slates. So of course we're drawn to drawing parallels between what we've learned in the new language and our own language. I'm positive that by learning a new language, you consolidate your language awareness, your awareness of your first language 100%. And if I can be perfectly honest, I think that's why in the UK and in Ireland, people struggle so much with learning new languages, because they've got a very limited awareness of English as a system.
Yes,
Because people here don't
yes,
really
the
learn
system.
grammar at school.
This is where I was leading the discussion. So I always try to teach my students that while learning a foreign language, you need to get into a completely different system, which you need to get accustomed to or get used to. Because in case you make the comparison with your native language, you will never be able to master it. So you have to transition from what you already know to what is about to be learned.
Yes, but to be able to do that, you need to understand how your first language works, don't you?
That's for
Yeah,
sure.
yeah,
That's for sure.
yeah. I think it saves time. I honestly think it saves time. If
Thank you
people
very
have,
much.
a good grasp
Mhm.
of how their how their mother tongue works, I think it really helped them, acquire and learn languages in the future. Absolutely. And I
Mhm.
think, whenever you ask CCQs or whenever you elicit from students, you're opening the door to people really asking themselves questions. I think, hold on a
Uh-huh.
second, is that how it
Mhm.
works? And oh yeah, okay. So for
Mhm.
that particular aspect, it works in the same way.
Mhm.
Ah,
Plus,
but with that other phrase, it doesn't work in the same way.
yes,
Okay,
and
I'll
plus,
take a note of
to
this.
this, we need to take into consideration the ethnicity, the differences in ethnicities, where people have absolutely sometimes opposite opinions of the same idea. You see, it's quite
It's
it's quite a
controversial.
topic. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. That was a really, really interesting question, Luminita. Thanks. Thanks a lot.
Amazing. And we have, Sophie, we have Ilknur
Brilliant.
raising her hand. So,
Yeah. Hello, Sophie.
Hello.
Hello. This is the photo. This is the photo my son is using for his online classes. It's not me, of course.
That's okay. Sometimes my name comes up on Zoom as my son.
Yeah. I'm a teacher trainer as well, and when I'm observing my students when they are giving some online courses, my name comes like Kerem, and they say, "Oh, we have a new student in the class. It's Kerem. Hi, Kerem. Can you, it's me. I'm sorry." Okay, it's İlknur from Sakarya University. Actually, I want to add a comment to what you have mentioned. You were saying that CCQs help us to teach the meaning more efficiently. I wanted to add that I mean the idea that we can use CCQs in teaching CLIL, content language integrated learning, because I used to go to a school and all the mathematics and all the subjects were all in English. So I wanted my teachers really ask us some questions so that we can confirm our understanding of the content as well. I think it would be more time saving. It would ensure the student that he or she is on the right path, or it would maybe motivate the student and encourage the students learn further.
I'm so glad you mentioned this, Ignore, because I'm really interested in CLIL, and it's something that I have to work with a lot here in Belfast. But I train teachers in different schools to work with kids who've just arrived and who may not have as much English. So CLIL obviously is where content and language become integrated. And here's the thing that I've often noticed, right? It's that whenever you train to become an English language teacher, you learn about CCQs. Right, whether it's a CELTA course or a Trinity course, or I mean, CCQs are one of you can't escape. You're going to learn about CCQs for sure. But what I've noticed is that when you look at let's say teacher training programs at university level, so here in the UK we use the PGCE, I think in Ireland the high dip, not quite sure. Somehow checking understanding doesn't come up, right?
Yeah.
And I was thinking, it's like, there's no way CCQs are only relevant for English language teaching. There's no way. If you teach math, of course you need to check your students have understood. So of course you need to check meaning. If you're teaching geography and you're teaching a new word, a new concept, you need to make sure that your students have understood that concept. I think CCQs don't just apply to language teaching. I think it applies to any concept that you're teaching. So I'm so grateful, that you mentioned this, because I think that applies to whatever you teach, whether you teach language or content.
And especially when you are teaching the content, subjects in a language that is other than the native language of the students.
Oh, 100%. But I think it's useful for everybody in the classroom.
Exactly.
I really, really think so.
Because Thank you very much for the nice explanation.
You're most welcome. You're most welcome. I'd love to chat more about this. That's a brilliant point. Thanks for that, Ilknur.
Thank you as well. Thank you as well.
Amazing. Right. Sophie, if you wish, you can ask our attendees a question.
Yes, right. So I know we had 4 reflective questions, but I'm actually going to ask the last one, right? Because a lot of the criticism that comes from eliciting is that, but so 1 minute we're being told to reduce our teacher talking time, right? But the next minute we're told to elicit. Well, that's more teacher talking time, right? So how do you know? How do you measure if your teacher talking time is too high, if it's too low? Right? How can we measure that? Because I know that a lot of teachers, whenever I say, look, try to elicit more, teachers have said to me, no, I mean, it's more teacher talking time, so no. There's always that fear about teacher talking time being too high, teacher profile being too high. So I'd like to know if anybody would like to share how they measure their own teacher talking time. And then I'll give you some homework to do. Anybody?
So we have Ilknur back. You can unmute yourself. Ilknur?
I'm unmuting. Okay, I'm here back.
Hi, Ilknur. Welcome
Hello.
back.
Yeah. Okay. When I first started teaching English as a second language, it was 23 years ago. I was working at Başkent University, which is one of the nice universities in Turkey. Our teacher trainer was asking us to invite some of our colleagues to observe us. So I was inviting one of my colleagues each week to observe one point of my teaching. Let's say my use of the blackboard, or my use of the teacher talking time, or my questions I ask. So we were receiving some feedback from our peers, from our colleagues, and also from our teacher trainers as well. We had a kind of in-service training for a whole year. For the first year I was teaching, and that was really precious. That really helped me a lot to improve my teaching skills. Although I am an English language teaching department graduate, I learned a lot when doing things at the school.
Absolutely. And I think that's a great point, the value of peer observations. And there's so much evidence through research and studies that they work. I think the reason why they don't get used more often is that logistically they're really hard to set up. But I think the value is brilliant. I think, whether you're a newly qualified teacher or you've been teaching 23 years, I still think there's so much to be gained from peer
Exactly.
observations.
Still, we are
Absolutely.
doing this at Sakai University. I sometimes invite my colleagues, or they sometimes invite me to observe the lessons. We give feedback to each other. That's
Amazing.
really, really very fruitful.
That's really, really useful. Brilliant. Can I give people some homework?
Yes,
This
please.
one I'm going to be disconnected. Right. I think here's a way to measure our teacher talking time and the idea of eliciting rather than telling, right? And all you need is an audio recorder, which you can find on your smartphone, right? And the idea is to record a chunk of your lesson. I don't think you need to record the whole thing, but let's say maybe that if you're teaching language, that language presentation stage where that's when we're most likely to lapse into explanation. If you can record this, right? And then listen back, not pleasant, I know, but if you can actually transcribe literally word for word, and then what I would do is I would use two colors and I would highlight statements and questions. And then I look at the balance again, that you're being a very visual, then I'll know. And what I've noticed is I've done this during lessons when I was being observed and lessons when I wasn't being observed, and that changed. So I noticed that my eliciting when I was being observed was a lot more robotic because, again, I was clearly checking my mirrors. And my questions were mostly display questions. But when I wasn't observed, the questions became a lot more referential. So it means I opened the door to things I didn't know. And there was a lot more interaction. But I think it's a useful way to think, okay, look, do I just explain too much? Should I elicit more? Transcribe 10 minutes of your lesson and look at the balance of statements versus questions. So that's homework.